And today's big questions are: how can I understand who holds power and influence in my community? And how can I organize with my neighbors to exert pressure on local political groups and politicians? And our tools. During our last workshop, that was the week before last, we did this exercise of community mapping, which helped us understand the different assets and issues that exist within our neighborhood. So for this workshop, we are going to focus on power mapping, which is a process to help us take those issues that we identified in our community mapping and really understand who holds power and influence over those issues and their outcomes. So this is where we are today. And we're going to dig into that more, but we are going to start with a really special guest speaker, Jamie Churches, who's currently at the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, but is also a former elementary school teacher turned Michigan State's representative. So Jamie lost her reelection last year, but I think what's really important to note is that she hasn't lost her commitment to public service. And she's joining us because this year she's been really focusing on holding corporate polluters accountable and working to protect Michigan's natural resources. So we're really excited to have her join us to speak today about her journey to public service, but also how she's used this tool of power mapping for in her fight for environmental justice. And I just really think hearing about the work that she's been doing will kind of help give you specific context to how we can use this tool of power mapping. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment, and we'll invite Jamie to share.
Thank you, Jessica. And the Arena team, like everyone has been really great. I'm so happy to be here today to chat with all of you. My name's Jamie, and I identify as a fifth grade teacher. That's what I came into this world as. I only wanted to be a teacher, and I loved teaching kids. I loved working in classrooms. I did it for 10 and a half years. I got my master's in educational administration, and I really wanted to be a principal. And I tried for 4 summers in a row to try and get a principal job, and it just didn't work out for me. But I taught during COVID. It was one of the most challenging years of my professional career, I'm sure, for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But teaching fifth graders how to do long division on a computer is really hard. And it's like quite a task. And I know a lot of my friends who taught kindergarten or first grade trying to teach kids how to read on a laptop when we don't know like how to work the computer all the way with kids is it was tough. But it also taught me a lot about community. And I like as being a teacher, and I was pulled by my colleagues to be a building rep. And then they were like, "Hey, can you be the vice president of our teachers union?" And I found myself on a pay freeze for 6 years and then organizing Red for Ed days and then negotiating contracts and asking for more because what we had wasn't sufficient for educators. It wasn't sufficient for the students that we taught, spending our own money on things. And that drew me in a different path. So I thought I wanted to go into administration, but then I had like this. I tell this story, it's very corny, but right before winter vacation, we have like kind of like celebratory days. You make cookies, you invite parents in. And it is like one of the most wild days of the year. And we did cookie decorating and we were getting ready. And I had just a quick writing assignment because I had extra time. And I asked the kids before they go away for their winter break if they could write 3 of their dreams on paper. And I remember after I sent them all for a winter break, I sat at my desk with like cookies everywhere. And I started reading all of their dreams on paper. And I was like, I wonder what mine are right now. And I wrote mine on a paper plate and I had three of them, and one of them was to run for office. And that's the one out of the three that scared me the most. And ever since that day, I was like, okay, I'm going to start thinking about this. And I did it. And the interesting thing about my seat is I live in southeastern Michigan, which is I'm like 20 minutes south of Detroit, and it is a 50-50 district. I didn't really fully understand what that meant when I was a teacher, but I was like, I'm gonna do this. I want to fight for education. I want to fight for gun reform because I was tired of teaching my students how to get prepared for active shooter drills. And we've had school shootings where they ask, like, what do I do after a school shooting? What do I do if I have a sibling in the school? What if I have to run and I fall? And teachers often have to answer the questions that society doesn't have. And there it's like a plate that's filling up and filling up all the time because we're not helping people in society. And I know a lot of people feel this in different workspaces. But I feel like working people often carry the burden of what we don't do from the level of government. So I ran for office. I knocked almost 10,000 doors by myself. It was crazy. And I was working full time as a teacher, and I won my seat by 660 votes, which was one of the tightest, if not the tightest in the state. And surprisingly, we won a Democratic trifecta in Michigan for the first time in almost 4 decades, which was something I didn't expect. We got there, and I was able to, with my team, pass things like universal background checks. That was my first bill, which was really cool because being a teacher and then getting required background checks for firearms. And I worked on infrastructure bill so that a township I have can buy a bridge that a company was trying to buy. So keeping it in the hands of residents and township owners. We fixed the Elliott Larson Act so that we have equal rights. We enshrined abortion rights in our state. So we got to do a lot of really cool things because we had a one seat majority. And it is a work of a whole team, not one person. The stars have to align. You have to give up a lot of your free time, and you open yourself up to a level of critique and criticism. And what I arrived to find was the divisiveness in our society on the political stage. It's it is really intense. And right now I feel like everyone's seeing that intensity play out because the media just allows for anyone to say anything. And we worked really hard. I had a wonderful team last year, but I couldn't, I didn't make it. I did about 8,000 doors this time, and it was considerably more taxing emotionally because threats, negativity, uh, people coming to my office, giving mailers back, like writing things, like everything that you can imagine. It, and I thought that was like only things that happened at a congressional level, but it's happening at a state level. And sometimes you get concerned, but it's not a reason for me to give up. But it does kind of make you stop and say, like, okay, how do I assess this situation? Why is this happening? How do I handle this differently? And sometimes we don't have those answers right now. Some of the things that are happening don't make sense, but I don't think that's a good enough reason to stop fighting. And losing my election was one of the most heartbreaking experiences that I've had. And I know a lot of people may have felt heartbroken by the election this time for many, many reasons. I know I had a lot of emotions about it. Um, so I took some time, and I didn't have a job. So our lame duck didn't go great, but I had to go find a job because I no longer had one. And my opponent who won is a 22, she might be 23 now. She was a 22-year-old college student and one of her first bills was very different from where I stand, requiring um, trans students not to be allowed to play in high school sports. And she ran on that issue and she won on that issue. And she has followed through on that issue and trying to work on that. The Senate is not going to vote on those things, but in the House, they now have control. So my opponent um, was just different than me in a lot of areas, and that is what won this time. Um, but it was so close. I feel like I'm kind of like jumping around. In the city I live in, it's usually blue. I live in Wyandotte, Michigan, and I lost by, I'm pretty sure it's 5 votes, and Donald Trump won by 6 votes. So it was like really, really close. And we have top of the ticket voting. So sometimes you don't even have to go all the way down to like my race. You can just pick Republican or Democrat, and then it goes in. And I think that was something that worked against me, but also the ads that were run were very tough. And um, then after I'm taxed with trying to find a job, thought maybe I could go back to teaching, and I couldn't get an interview teaching. And I don't know why that is. I didn't get feedback, but I know that when I walk down the street, I'm called a communist when I'm walking my dog sometimes. I know that some people think I'm a woke liberal. Uh, So it was hard to find a job. And then some other jobs, I tried to work for the Giffords organization because I really care about gun safety. And they were opening a state advisor role. And I was interviewing for it. And they came back and said they're dissolving the position because of the political climate in our state, in our country. So a lot of the opportunities that I wanted to have were dependent upon our majority, which we lost. So I didn't have a lot of those opportunities. I'm sure I wasn't great interviewing at all interviews because I've been on so many interviews. I think I did 18 interviews. Um, and nothing really fit. And I started just listening. So I think it was in November after I had lost, I got a call from someone who worked at Sierra Club, and he was like, "Hey, churches, like we know you know about this because you've talked about it before, but these environmental folks, they heard that you have done some work on this and they want to know if you'll join a call." So, um I joined a call, and it's a bi-weekly Zoom meeting with environmental folks. And I'm like, I'm just gonna keep my camera off. I'm gonna listen. I care about this. It's about my community. But the more I was on it, the more I like turned my camera on and started listening more or talking. So the issue is I live in the city of Wyandotte. And if you look out, I'm in my living room right now. If you look out my window, a block and a half away is a company called BASF. It is the largest chemical corporation in the world. And I think at the one, they build like car seat foam where I live and other things. I think they said, I went on a tour there when I was a state rep, and I think they also invented the Tide Pods there, which is interesting. But they have been since 1986 in violation of a consent decree. They have been outputting on average 58 to 60 gallons of contaminated groundwater into the Detroit River every single minute. And I knew this, and they're supposed to be building a filtration system. It's called an inward gradient, trying to get the groundwater flow to go back toward the chemical corporation instead of out toward the water. I've been working with those activists, started listening in on the calls, but I couldn't not do anything because it's like the natural teacher in me. And I think I have an organizing spirit is what I'm learning, because when I have information, when I have knowledge, I want to share it because I want to give the power to other people. I always have wanted other people, my students, to understand that you can literally do anything that you put your mind to. And if you see something happening, a wrongdoing, or something that can be changed, you have the power to change it or influence it in some way. So I took that approach even after my election, in the midst of not being able to find a job, working odd jobs. And I just kept uh, organizing around this issue. I started working with Sierra Club, For the Love of Water, SDEV, which is a Southwest Detroit, has this environmental group. Then I met the whistleblower who works at Eagle, which is the state regulating agency in Michigan. And the EPA is also involved in this issue. Um, I did a local just organizing at a coffee shop just to tell folks like, hey, if you would like to learn about this issue, this is what BASF does. This is what's been happening since 1986. They should have this fixed by 2027, but they haven't really started. Um, so I started doing that, and then a man asked me to coffee who works for the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, and he was like, "Hey, tell me about the stuff that you've been doing. Tell me like how it's going." We had coffee, and I explained to him like I bring people here, I teach them about this. I don't really know what's going to come of it. I'm just trying to like spread awareness. And he was like, well, we've been working on this issue for 2 years and we've needed someone like this. And he asked if I could consult and get paid to do the work of organizing. So I think something on this call that I want all of you to know is that sometimes you can do the work that you want to do, and the job will almost form around you because you are fulfilling a need that other people are also working on. I have no idea how that happened. I feel very grateful that it did because now I'm also connected to so many people that care about this issue. Um, the city politics are interesting on this issue. The BASF is really actively involved in the community. They donate a lot of money, and they are our largest taxpayer. They pay about $1.5 million in taxes. We have our own municipal electric and water companies in the city I live in. They are the largest user of municipal power. The facility is quite large. It's I think in the communities in which I live, we call it downriver. It's like south of Detroit. Um, they are the largest employer, and they're a strong community partner. They do teaching, they work with our fire department, they teach like STEM activities, but they're also actively emitting contaminated groundwater. So to bring back to the issue, the reason why contaminated groundwater into the Detroit River is such a cause for concern, and this is where I started to really dive in deep, is they're emitting things like benzene, naphthalene, PFAS, PFOS, arsenic. And three of those are like a lot of those are heavy metals, but three of those are bioaccumulative chemicals, which are what we would call forever chemicals that never leave your body. And when you discharge those into the Detroit River, which has already been polluted decades prior, we're adding to that pollution, but we're knowingly doing it at this point. It's not something that we don't know about. And where I start to raise concern is this is the largest corporation for chemicals in the world. They also own 4.5% of the global crop market. So they have the means to build an inward gradient, to build a filtration system, to put in a new seawall, but it hasn't been done. And the regulating agencies have never fined them ever. They have been like, it has been documented that this is happening, but there has been no consequence. And I find it interesting. And I got curious as to why these things were happening. The most concerning part of all of this is in the Detroit River, 1,700 feet from what we call the critical assessment zone. um, is where our water intake valve is for the city of Wyandotte, since we have our municipal power. And I mean, I'm not a water scientist. I don't know, but it just makes sense. If you have a couple of football fields upstream, a chemical corporation that is ongoingly emitting harmful chemicals into the aquatic ecosystem, and our water intake valve is downstream from that, there has to be some kind of concern or vigilance around our drinking water. And I was like, I wonder what these could be. So you have to use your connections in all of this kind of work. I used to babysit all the time when I was a young girl. And I remembered one of the girls I babysat, she actually worked on my campaign. I was like, her mom is cool. And her mom works for the Detroit Free Press. So I was like, I'm going to call Mrs. Seamus and I'm going to see if she knows anyone who worked on the Flint water crisis, if there are any experts around this issue. Sure enough, she knows Dr. Monahana, who discovered the Flint water crisis with Elin Bentanzo. So this is Elin. She is one of the people in my coalition that she has all the expertise. She discovered a lead issue in Washington, D.C., and then she discovered the same thing in Flint. And she is a national drinking water expert. She's been working for 25 years. She's a mom. Like she takes her kids to like summer camps. She's like calling me on her lunch hour doing this because she cares about this issue. And she told me all of my concerns were valid. And she started joining our meetings. I started making agendas for those Friday meetings that I used to just sit on. They asked me to start making the agendas. And I started presenting at them. I started working with Elin. She told me what we need to FOIA for. So we started FOIAing for documents, the Freedom of Information Act, to see, well, what are these water samples? How is our water facility? And what we found is that when I asked the city for a FOIA request, I got a call from the mayor asking me why I was doing such a thing. And that was interesting. So then I just put it into the state and I got information back from the state. One of my requests was partially denied, so I had to work with the law center to appeal it because from 2014 to 2020, a certain amount of information was given to me, but the 2020 to the 2025 documentation had slightly different information. So Elin wanted to fix that discrepancy. So we're in the middle of fixing that right now and trying to get that information, obtain that information. But we found that we were kind of poking a bear. And we didn't realize that there is more than one issue, this corporate pollution issue. There's also another issue because the city started to get uncomfortable. And I love my city. I would never try to harm anyone. Like they do a lot of great things. But what we found was they said the water's fine. The water's fine. And the testing for the water shows that the water right now is fine. However, I still am educating the community, trying to have everyone remain vigilant because we are downstream from a known contamination source. And we got a meeting with Eagle. I got about 100 people to join the call and I met them at the coffee shop and I may have like cut slivers of paper and each question was from Elin Bentanzo and they were very technical questions and I gave each person a slip of paper and on the Zoom meeting, they all asked one of these questions for the state agency. But on that call, the mayor had said the water is fine. And then we got the FOIA request back about a week later, and that was April 29th. The same day that everything was fine, Eagle had submitted a sanitary survey, which is kind of like a report card for a water facility. And Eagle, which is a state regulating agency, like it's like the EPA for the state, said that there are 4 significant deficiencies at our water facility, and a significant deficiency is an immediate threat to public health. And our reservoirs were down. We had tennis balls in them, bugs. There was like a plethora of issues, and I've worked with Elin on these things, but the state isn't required to share that information. You have to be a resident knowing to ask for a sanitary survey. they don't have to tell us that these things are happening. We also found from the water report and the sanitary survey that from 2017 until 2025, they discontinued fluoride in our water. So we don't have fluoride, and they never told us, and it was printed on the survey that it was. So we're over here uncovering different types of issues when we're coming up against looking at a corporate polluter. And then we're finding that we're lacking some transparency. So there's not really a big solution, but I want to get back to that coalition building because I'm still in the middle of all of this and I'm learning and growing. I'm not doing it totally perfectly, but in all of this, sometimes you have to realize that you're going to find people that you don't expect. Like I found a law firm who is advocating for this issue. I found a water engineer who discovered Flint, who wants to be a partner in investigating this. Then we use things like the press to get this amplified message out to the public so that they can know that these things are happening because this is their city and it's a very nuanced issue. Um, and then we have BASF, and Marika Diamond is someone that is working for BASF. So she's like their spokesperson. She goes around and gives checks to people like, hi, this is from BASF. It's kind of more of an adversarial relationship from where I'm sitting because they're like, oh, you're trying to shine a light on things that are uncomfortable that they're not exactly talking about. And we're asking the city, we're asking BASF, we're asking Eagle to have town halls so that residents can come and ask questions. So you may make local electeds feel exposed, even though that's not your intent. You may make corporations feel uncomfortable and talk and have residents want to talk about things that maybe they're not comfortable talking about. And you might, I mean, encourage people to start being curious, start thinking. And it starts as something that you think you can hold, but it becomes something way bigger once it's a community. And it's not my issue, it's our issue that we're working on together. So taking a stand is very nuanced. I even have some Democrats that are not strong on this issue because it's really uncomfortable. And that's something you don't expect. Being a Democrat, I used to think like all of us fight together, but sometimes I have seen through this that I have been called too progressive. Like I shouldn't rerun for the seat because I'm too progressive. So like things like that you can't be afraid of. And I just glad you're here today so that you can maybe use this as a template and apply it to your own experiences so you can work in your own neighborhoods and communities and make a difference.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jamie. So glad to have you and to just really be able to learn and learn from like your direct experience working with this. I want to take 5 minutes or so here for any questions that folks might have for Jamie, either on her experience running for office, but this experience of holding local officials and corporations accountable, and any questions around what that organizing has looked like. So you can either raise your hand, use the raise hand function, or you can drop questions in the Q&A as well. And I'm just getting there. So Alejandro, would you like to unmute and share your question?
It's not a question, but I wanted to highlight a great point you made, which was the point about as you were sort of poking the bear, you learned more, and the reactions you got from local elected officials and along with, your local corporation, sort of gave you a hint that you were finding a real issue and that there was more to the problem. And that I have certainly experienced in my own efforts at home. But I really wanted to highlight that. That's a great point.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Yeah, I think once you start poking around there, you find when you find that friction, you know that you're going in the right direction and finding something. Lolita says too progressive means effective and vigilant. Nice. Anyway, probably have time for one more question or comments too on anything that's been shared.
I actually do have a question now that I'm thinking about it. Um, do you have any recommendations for folks who just want to start learning about how to file public relations or public records requests and whatnot, who are not from a legal background?
Yeah, I would say depending on like what area you're filing, find someone that you trust or a law firm like this law firm, they are answering my questions. And I went to someone who I know knows like a water engineer. So this is her area of expertise and she was able to kind of give me line by line. So I would say lean into your network and see who you know in those spaces and have them connect you. It didn't happen immediate. It took me months in order to find the right people. But I would say just keep talking to folks and something will materialize.
Cool.
Thank you.
One more question. This came in through the Q&A, and it says, when you started organizing locally before you were hired on a law firm, did you have issues with the spaces you used? Did people listen to you and want to get more involved?
Just the public. Is that what like?
Yeah, Gina, do you mind maybe sharing more context to that?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about like if you felt like you were the only one kind of, trying to bring these issues up, and you mentioned that you used some like local public spaces. I'm not sure if you used like a library or coffee shops or something. Like, did you have any issues with those like spaces or business owners being like, hey, don't do that here? Or like, did you actually get people being like, hey, you know what? This is a really important issue. Like, I want to get involved. Like, how is that in your early experience?
Yeah, so some of this builds off of my experience as a state rep. So I know what businesses support me and which ones don't. This coffee shop, they care a lot because they have more progressive values like myself. And they also have a business that is 95% water. So they really care about this and they live in the community and have a business here. But leaning into my networks, I think my friend Layla, she helped like organize around the uncommitted movement and she works with We the People. So she reached out to all the folks at We the People, which is in Detroit. I have someone that is organizing with Democratic Socialists. A lot of them live in this area. So we sent like a thing like we're working on corporate accountability. Anyone want to come to these meetings? So I just basically told some of my girlfriends and I was like, hey, do you guys know anyone in your spaces that want to come to this? And then I just started an email list and I was like, I put a sign up sheet in the coffee shop. I'm like, if you want to come to this, let me know. I put it on my Instagram and my Facebook and people just showed up. And it was like a lot of people kind of, and it just keeps growing. And every time I just put it on my socials, I send an email to the people that are already going. And it started smaller and it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
That's so amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and it's in the free press and it's been on the news. So like those things and press relationships that I've cultivated have also helped with that.
And the absolute last question we have here is from Ronald in the chat. So the question is, how did you get tapped into the Democratic power structure? Was it organic or did you deliberately search out the political power structure?
I mean, it was deliberate, I think. I was at my house during COVID and I was like, I want to do this. So I emailed the rep because he was timing out and I was like, hey, I want to do your job because you're not doing it soon. So can you have coffee with me? And I had coffee with that guy and I told him I was doing this and then I did it. So I sort of did, but I asked him like, hey, can you introduce me to a couple of folks? And he did, and I took it from there. So I think if you see something, find your path and then just talk to everybody about it.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Jamie. If folks want to stay connected with you and the work that you're doing, what is the best way to reach out?
I will put my email in the chat. It's my campaign email, but I personally check it. So just feel free to email me, ask me questions, and I will get back to you. Thank you for having me.
Yay! Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, just so helpful to get your insights and to have a real world example of how this sort of power mapping exercise that we're going to go through, what that looks like in action, in actual practice. So just so appreciate your time and sharing your insights here with us. And I see your email here in the chat, so folks can copy that down and reach out if they have questions. So thank you. Okay. So with that shared, I'm going to share my screen once more. And we are going to go into the actual step of power mapping. And thank you, Jess. Jess has dropped in the chat handout that you could follow along. It looks like this. If my screen would load. Cool. Many folks are already there. This is our handout, and I encourage you to copy here and a journal copy so you can keep notes and take notes there. But we're going to get into the actual step-by-step of what it looks to map power on a particular issue. So the first thing that you want to do with power mapping is to actually identify your issue. And I think it's a really good exercise to write a short narrative regarding your issue. If you're here for the community mapping exercise, we went through what it looks like to walk around your neighborhood and to make an assessment of the different assets, of the different resources, and of the different issues that you identified. And if you're of a place, if you're of a neighborhood, you likely have some sort of lived experience of an issue. Maybe it's that you didn't even need to do your, a really thorough community mapping because you already have like lived experience of a specific issue. So many different ways of coming to identifying your issue. But once you know what your issue is, we want to write that narrative so that we have a clear and specific identified issue and know what we're working with. And then once we have that that issue, we're going to just write a list of all the people involved in this issue. So like we shared a couple slides ago, for this issue with clean water in Michigan, we actually had this full list of people, of stakeholders in the different stakeholders in the issue of clean water in Michigan. And again, you can look at the example issue here in the handout of what that looks like. And then here's where we're going to get into kind of like the actual nitty-gritty of what the power mapping exercise is that once you've identified the issue, we want to go to and made that list of stakeholders. We want to go to that and look at that list and actually dig into where each of these stakeholders stands on a specific issue. So just offering some guidance here on how you can think about assessing where they stand. For that person, we can think about what is their position on the issue? Where does this person stand? What does this person care about? Who do they stand for? What are their values, priorities, and loyalties? A really big one here is, what do they have to lose? What is at stake for this person? Have they made any public statements on the issues? Can you find any specific quotes of where they stand? So you're not making, you know, assumptions or inferences. You actually have their words of what they've said on the issue, to kind of identify where they stand. And then what is this person's power in relationship to other stakeholders? Looking at this can help you get a sense of the different dynamics between different stakeholders. So kind of Jamie was just sharing with this issue of clean water, once she started, poking around, once she made that FOIA request, the mayor reached out and asked, why are you looking for this information? So if you were going to do a stakeholder assessment of the mayor, for this particular question of what is this person's power in relationship to other stakeholders, Jamie shared that this employer, BASF, is one of the largest employers and one of the largest taxpayers in her city and in her district. So that is some of those levers of power you might think about. If your stakeholder was the mayor, you might think of what that person's power is in relationship to the other stakeholder, BASF, and what are the different things at stakes there. If what does the mayor have at stake with, if they were to lose this employer and this taxpayer. So that's really what this exercise is about, is kind of getting at the different dynamics of power and the different relationships that are at play. So again, if we're using this this example here of clean water, this is one of the stakeholders that Jamie just shared and spoke about, Elin Betanzo. So we know she's a national drinking water expert, with nearly 25 years of experience. And then we would want to do this same assessment for Elin. So what is their position? She supports immediate driven reforms to ensure safe drinking water, transparency, and environmental justice. What does this person care about? What do they stand for? What are their values and loyalties? She cares deeply about protecting public health, especially children, from lead and water contamination. She values scientific integrity, accountability, and equity. What do they have to lose? Her professional credibility and influence with policymakers. Her authority rests on technical accuracy and moral clarity. What are their public statements on this issue? There's no reason anyone should be drinking lead in their water. Pretty straightforward there. And then what is this person's power in relation to other stakeholders? High technical and moral influence, strong public credibility, but limited regulatory or enforcement power. She influences through her expertise, through relationships with the media, through public policy advising. She is currently working with the Detroit Senate to change Detroit's on water facility transparency. And thank you, Jamie, who is the person who provided this context for this slide. So that's our assessment of one particular stakeholder in this issue. And the thing you're going to want to do is, once you've done that one stakeholder assessment, you want to do it for the rest of the list, which, depending on our issue, can be very long. So again, here, using another example, we go to our next stakeholder. who is Marika Diamond, who is the community liaison or BASF. She represents BASF's stance on compliance and corporate responsibility. And then, so we're gonna do the same thing here. We're gonna look at what is their position. She represents BASF's stance on compliance and corporate responsibility. She frames the company as concerned but not at fault. What does this person care about? Their loyalties, what do they stand for? She's a community liaison, so she's preserving BASF's image, managing stakeholder relationships, and minimizing reputational or legal risk. What do they have to lose? She has to lose her credibility, trust with the community, and BASF's standing in regulatory and civic circles. Any public statements? None, which, you know, not everyone will have a public statement depending on the stakeholder that you're looking at and assessing, and that is okay. And then what is this person's power in relation to other stakeholders? She has corporate communication control, access to company resources, and can influence how information is shared, but she cannot unilaterally change BASF's operations or policy. So yeah, I think that can help you start to get a sense of what, you know, what this exercise looks like and how we go through this. So I see a question in the Q&A. I will take a pause for questions shortly. And it looks like it's a long, juicy one. Cool. And after you've done all of the stakeholder assessment, with all of this information, you are going to actually figure out where do you stand on this issue. After you've done all of this research and have all of this information, what is your personal view? And again, these issues are probably really like close and personal to us. So very, very often we will come into this exercise already knowing how we feel about a particular issue. But it's also good to clearly identify it for yourself. And this is in the exercises as well, but you can see here the kind of personal statement that Jamie made for herself regarding this issue. And then once you've done all of that as well, you're going to want to think about what stakeholders you want to reach out to. And I think the great thing about this exercise is once you've done the stakeholder assessment on all the different stakeholders, you can really have this kind of overhead view of what are the different levels of power and who has influence over specific things, to look at how you can be strategic about your organizing. After doing this, where do you think you see the greatest organizing potential? Where do you see power that isn't being tapped, or a resource that isn't being tapped could be? And then who do you want to start organizing with? And I think one of the important things to remember in this exercise is that it takes time. And even as, as Jamie was sharing with us, this was this is work that's happened over months of time, weeks and months. So the stakeholder assessment does take time. It's okay. We're going to have some actual heads down time to start doing this for your issue that you're working on personally. So you absolutely will not get to all of the assessment today. It's okay if you don't even get to that step. If you just get it writing your narrative and starting your list, that's great. But it's something that takes time. And again, just sharing this example here of power mapping and what the power mapping exercise kind of helped Jamie figure out in terms of levers of power and who has organizing influence. And again, all of these examples are in your handout. Which, speaking of, we are going to get to our exercise. So, yeah, Jess, if you don't mind dropping the link again, that would be great in case people haven't had a chance to open it. But we're going to take some time here, I think just 10 minutes, for you to begin to actually fill this out for yourself and to use this structure to write out that short narrative about the issue that you are working with. And again, short, 3 sentences should do the trick. And to start going through this and writing out a list of all of your different stakeholders. And then if you get there in the 10 minutes, in these 10 minutes we'll have here, to choose, start looking at the different stakeholders and assessing where they stand. As I wrote here, this document is yours, so encourage you to copy and paste different stakeholder blocks, and for as many stakeholders as you have to start to write those out. Any questions about the exercise before we go into some heads down time? Thank you, Jamie.
Have a great day.
Have a good day. All right. If you have any questions about the exercise, please feel free to drop in the chat. I'll get some music going for us, and we'll be here for about 10 minutes before going into some breakouts. Hoping that soundtracks helped you on this quest that we're on of power mapping. But yeah, from here we are going to go into some short breakouts. We'll be here for about 10 minutes, and you'll be in groups of 3 and 4. And this is just an opportunity to, start by sharing your name, where you're organizing, or what group you're organizing with. And really just to get into share a little bit about your issue. I think it would be great to share your short narrative that you've just written about, and then to also share the list of stakeholders that you identified. Hopefully you were able to get a start on those 2 steps. And then to think about what's need to take to continue to assess power around your issue. There in your handout, there is a section here for you to begin to write some of these things. And this is a non-exhaustive list here, so please add on as you start to think about things of like what lists of actions you need to take. Yeah, and when we come back, we'll have some Q&A, and then we will close. So yeah, if you Jess, if you want to open up the breakout rooms, please go ahead. Breakout rooms are optional, but an opportunity for you to make new connections. But if you're not able to join a breakout room, please feel free to stay in the main space for our closing. Yeah, thanks. Ashley said the power mapping information can help you better name the issue and the dynamics at play. The information can then help you clearly communicate the issue, which allows you to develop focused and intentional actions. And when you have a plan, focus and intentional actions, it makes bringing people in, building coalition more easier, and because there's clear direction. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Ashley. Cool. So we are just going to take a quick second to close. Jess is going to drop a feedback survey in the chat. Please do fill that out. That just kind of helps us assess how we're doing and making sure that we're able to best support you in future sessions, and to make sure we're showing up in a way that is supportive, and we do look at those. So please do share, please do fill out that survey. We will send a follow-up email with the recording, and if there's something that you request in the feedback survey, we'll share that and any resources that were shared here. Encourage you to stay in touch with each other. You can take a moment to drop your LinkedIns in the chat if you want. Also hope that each of you are in the Arena community Slack. That's a really great way to stay connected. And oh, look at me, including come to building local political pressure. Well, that's a holdover, but have these two sessions coming up next week. So one of them is, why do I get so many fundraising emails and texts? The questions we all have, the questions we all want answered. And then our for Let This Radicalize You, we're meeting on Thursday. And again, you do not need to have read to attend. We will share some text for discussion for you. And that's all we've got, folks. So thank you so much for joining us, for your attention, your questions, for doing this work, and just really look forward to seeing you in our next session. But for now, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. See y'all.
Bye, friends.